All right, for the past month or so, I've been playing around with a lot of the new 50 series RTX cards, and there's been some great times with them, and there's been some meh times with them. I don't really think the selling points are as great as Nvidia made them out to be. I think the performance on most of them is lackluster. They're not bad products, but with the way the prices have gone, they're just out of control for the performance you're getting. I mean, we're buying a 5 to 10% uplift for, double the price these days. But unfortunately, most of the old cards aren't available. So what we're going to be looking at today is how to squeeze the most amount of performance out of your 5070 Ti. I kind of predicted that this was going to be the best bang for the buck, highish end card when this generation came out, just because, I think it was supposed to be like 750. They're going for about a grand. And basically, this is the 4080 replacement. Last year you could buy a 4080 for $1,000, and it had about the performance that now you could buy a 4070 Ti for $1,000. They're roughly equal, but now you get multi-frame gen. So basically, in that regard, nothing's changed, but you get multi-frame gen now. But it does have the new DDR7 GDDR7 and all that good stuff. And, it is a new core or whatever. So we're going to see what we could do overclocking wise. So in order to do this, we're just going to jump right in. I'm going to show you kind of my techniques and everything. I like to have a couple of tools. So 3D Mark, it's a great benchmarking tool. And then MSI Afterburner is how we're going to be doing the actual manipulation. So I like doing Speedway just because it's a 4K ray trace test that's gonna, reflect basically what a lot of gaming these days is gonna look like. And what I like about it is it loads in, runs it pretty quick, gives me the down and dirty, and spits me back out to where I can get right back into editing on my MSI Afterburner. So if you get both these installed and good to go, there's a free version of 3D Mark, or I mean, I have the paid one because it just gets you access to the full suite of benchmarks. But I think it's like 30 or 40 bucks or something if you want that. And if you get into overclocking long term, it's good just to have a simple benchmark kind of test as you go. And like I said, this one pops in and out of it real fast and allows me to continually test, make tweaks, and test. So as we go through the benchmarking today, there's kind of three, scenarios I wanted to look at. First of all, you have to have just your baseline. So what does the card do stock? And then I wanted to look at purely, could I reduce the voltage and power draw and actually increase the performance a little bit? And then three, what if we just went all in on applying as much voltage as we can and as much frequency as we can? And we'll take a look at, how those played out. The rig that I'm going to be doing this on today is a little bit different. I usually cover AMD stuff. This gives me an Intel-based gaming PC. It's going to be the 14900K and a Z790 with 32 gigs of 7200 megahertz DDR5. And then we've got the Gigabyte Geforce RTX 5070 Ti Gaming OC. And we just want to look at the specifications from the manufacturer. So what they're saying is the core clock on this will run at 2588 because this is the OC version. And it looks like they stepped it up. They're claiming about like 136 megahertz over what the reference, which was 2452. I have a feeling that there's quite a bit of room in there. And then the other thing we're going to look at is this GDDR7. It doesn't say it here, but I believe on this model, it's 28 gigabytes a second on the transfer rate. And we'll take a look at that as we go through as well. So first thing we'll look at is just MSI Afterburner here. This basically gives you control over the video card and the different things, and we'll go through just some of the basics. Power limit, not all cards will this be the same on, so I can go up to 116 on this card. For example, on my 5090, it does not let you go positive at all because the spec is already up to 600 watts, and 600 watts is the limitation on the power cable there going to it. So at least on mine, it's like 0%. And then some of the non-OC models, a lot of people say like, oh, why waste money on the OC model? Like you're paying an extra $100 for, 25 megahertz. That's kind of true from the factory, but some of the non-OC models I've seen in the past won't allow you to raise the power limit, and the OC versions will. So with this, you can go up to 16% more wattage out of this card. Now, when you're doing like an undervolt, because the relationship of frequency voltage and all these different things, lots of times you'll actually end up under the power limit anyways. But when you go to that maximum overclock, maximum voltage type scenario, that's where the power limit can come in. You come over here to the middle, and you can do just a base core clock increase, but that's not really what we're going to do today because we want to have a little bit more control over it. So, this is a possibility. You can just like, hey, crank this up, but I generally find I can't get as much of a frequency increase because I don't really know, what target voltage this is going for or anything like that. It's just kind of saying like, hey, plus, whatever. I don't know if that's all the time or what. I'd honestly have to do some more research on that, but I don't really use that slider. And the second one is the memory. So this is not true on the 4000 series cards, but on the 5000 series card, my experience so far is you can just max that out. And I've tested it at increments, and generally in the past, what I would say is go little by little, test incremental by incremental. But here's the thing about the 5000 series. It's using that GDDR7 memory chips, and they are rated, I believe the speed starts at like 32 gigs per second, and NVIDIA has it clocked at 28. And when you go into your overlay and you look at this, because it's DDR, double data rate, it's going to be, half of whatever you think you would see. So at the 28, it's going to report 14. And so 14 plus 2000, 16, 16 times 2 is 32. So this basically gets you to, what the original advertised spec of GDDR7 is. I don't know why NVIDIA decided to reduce it down. I think on most of them, it's 28 gigabit per second. And then I think on the 5080, it's 30. But I have seen on any of my cards, no negative. The performance continues to increase as you push it up, 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 up. And I've not seen any artifacting, any weird visuals, anything like that from the memory clock. So if you don't have a 5000 series card, you got to do this incrementally. And I recommend doing the core clock first, and then just incrementally seeing how fast your memory can go. But on the 5000 series with the GDDR7, we seem to be well below the threshold. In fact, I bet this could really go a lot higher, but Afterburner limits us to the plus 2000. And then the core clock, we're going to leave that at 0. So, and then the core voltage, this slider seemingly does nothing. You can put it at plus 100, 0, whatever. Maybe that's when you use the core clock, it'll do something, but we're going to use the curve editor in this video, and this seemingly has no impact once you do that. So we can just leave that alone. The couple things I do like to do, though, is unlock voltage control and unlock voltage monitoring. And then when you come over here to monitoring, this is all the stuff I have that I monitor my overlay. Once you do that, you can come down here to voltage. And I recommend having the monitor voltage on because that allows you to see what the card is naturally trying to target. And then based off that target, we can adjust on the curve editor. So we'll take a look at, well, sure, we'll go ahead and go into the curve editor and take a look at where it's at. So I'll kind of jump ahead and I'll prove it here because I have some footage. But basically, the card in its default state targets about 1 volt. Sometimes it'll go up to 1.005. I think in stock, I don't know if I ever saw it go to 1.01, which would be like right here. But as you can see, even though Gigabyte was advertising, I think what is that, 2588, at 1.01, it's at about 2842. And when we look at the factory footage, that's what it does. So this is what we get So before we do any amount of overclocking or undervolting or anything like that, so here I should have left this back at 0. What I recommend is go through and do just your baseline testing, because you want to make sure that what you're doing has a positive impact. So run a couple of, your favorite 3D Mark benchmarks, Speedway, Steel Nomad, whatever you want, and then get into Steam and, play some of your favorite games. Ideally ones with built-in benchmarks, just so it's exactly the same every single time. And just write a couple of the results down so you know your baseline. So that's strategy. It's not even strategy. That's just like step one, get your baseline. After that, what I wanted to look at is coming in and doing a little bit of kind of a combo undervolt and overclock. So I knew the memory right off the bat because I tested cards previously. I'm just going to go to 2000 right off the bat. Power limit, I slide it all the way up because I don't ever want it to slow down because it's worried about using too much power. But generally, I always like anytime I can remove something from the equation when overclocking, especially when I know it's not going to be a problem, I do, just so nothing weird happens. So like I know if I undervolt, I'm never probably even going to hit the factory power limit, but I'm just going to max that out just to make sure it doesn't get in my way. And then we come into the curve editor. So I felt like from the factory, we could get better performance and we could do it for less voltage. So this isn't truly like an undervolt. So if you're going to just flat do an undervolt, what you would want to do is, whatever it said the reference was, like I think it said 2588 or something. So like on this curve, just to go over some of the basics, you can just drag an individual point. And then the other thing you can do is if you hold shift and you down click and drag, it selects all the points. And then there's a lot of hotkey shortcuts. So if you hold shift and hit enter, it will level it out. So what have we done here? This would be just a pure undervolt. So you're like maybe in a very power limited system, or you're worried about turning your room into a heater because it's the middle of summer, or small form factor heat management. But basically what we've done in this situation is we've taken the factory, Gigabyte advertised specs, so about 2588, and we've just said, hey, we're going to run that at 0.94, and that's where we're just going to end up. We're never going to go above that. And if you run tests here, you'll see that the card boosts to 25, 72 in this case, and it'll probably never use more than like 0.94 volts. Now, the thing is, if this is the gaming OC model, it's a massive card. You're probably not doing small form factor, and you're probably not, and it has amazing cooling. I could not seem to get this card over like mid 60s, even with overclocking. So with that, we're going to look at like, hey, let's just try to get some good performance with a little bit of an undervolt, because when you undervolt, you're basically saying you need less voltage for the same or greater amount of frequency. And so it'll hit that frequency more often, and it'll also keep the temps and the power down, which if you go too far, you'll just crash the card and you'll have to start over. But, you can hit kind of a sweet spot, and I think we'll see that with the results. So for me, I know the card will boost under the factory settings to like 1.01, right about there. So I want to cut off some millivolts. Maybe I want to say at 0.97, I want to see if I can get 3 gigahertz. All right. So what we do is we drag my 0.975 volts and we put it to 3 gigahertz. Then what I want to do is I want to flatten the curve. So there we go. So this is what I see in a lot of guides, and it does work, but there's a better way of doing this, in my opinion. So I've seen a bunch of people say like, hey, here we go, the card will boost to 3 gigahertz, and it'll only ever use 0.95, so you're getting a better frequency, lower voltage. We got to test it on the card, of course. But as you can see, there's kind of like this plateau, and then that's like the peak, and it never tries to achieve more. So in practice, what I see is while this actually does work a little bit, it doesn't work very good. So if we go out and we apply this and we hit the Speedway test, you'll kind of see what I mean. And we'll see if we hit 3 gigahertz or not and kind of how the voltage is looking. Okay, yeah. So as you see, the card's pulling 0.97 volts, but it's only doing 2865. Sorry, yeah. So we're actually doing, I mean, this would be a good just straight undervolt, but it's not giving me exactly what I want because we're about the same on frequency as what it was running factory. Just now we're only using 0.97 volts to do it, and only about 300 watts, and that's with the 200 megahertz overclock on the memory. So yeah, as a straight undervolt, that worked, but it didn't really give me the performance I wanted. I wanted to get to see if we can get to 3 gigahertz. So the reason why I included that is because I see a lot of guides or like things, I think even materials from MSI, although they're dated, that's kind of how they show to do it. So I'm going to show you my way. And if you ever get this messed up, you can just basically exit out of everything and then shift click and it'll go back to where you're at. So what I want to do is instead of having that plateau, because the card will fight to go up the plateau, it'll just stay like one notch below it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my 0.975. Actually, you know, I'm going to go a little lower than that. I think we can go lower. So maybe my 965. And I'm going to move the whole curve to put it up on that 3 gigahertz. And then I need to give it a little bit of something to aspire to. And you know what? That actually looks pretty good, but I don't want it just climbing to the moon. So then what I'm going to do is then I'm going to level the rest of this. Oh. So what I really want it to mostly target is about that 3 gigahertz, but I got to give it a little something to aspire to, or else it won't climb the plateau, has been my experience. So we're going to kind of level it there, and then if it wants to, it can jump a little bit higher, but then I'm going to level it out and stop it there. And we're going to see now how this performs comparatively and see where the voltage is at. Okay, so here we go. Now we're at 0.985 and we're over 3 gigahertz. That's pretty good. You know, I don't know if maybe somebody would have like an arbitrary number of like, oh, hey, I wanted to keep it lower, but and you can continue to play with that curve, but like right here, I'm seeing that I picked up, you know, probably about 150 megahertz over what it was wanting to do, or whopping like something like 500 over the reference card, and I'm running it slightly undervolted, so 0.98. Pulling about 300 watts even. So in this scenario, we're about even on the wattage. We're pulling a little less voltage, but we're getting a lot more performance out of it. So since it already finished, we'll take a look at the results. So right here, 7,994. Can't talk. So that puts us, I mean, pretty good. Not amazing, but above average. But that's being voltage limited. And as you can see here, we're running right about 3 gigahertz the whole time. And it just held it real solid, and we were doing it as slightly undervolted, about 0.98. And the temps looked great. So that's a pretty good jump. I can tell you when you run it completely factory, it comes in at 74 like 40 or something. So here, if we go 994 divided by 7446, I think. So we gained about 7% performance on this test, which, I mean, really, these days, 7% is like almost bigger than the generational uplift on some of these cards. So that's really pretty solid. But bottom line, as you can see, my strategy, I kind of bring my target, I really wanted it about the 950. So um, if we wanted to get the voltage even lower, we could just continue to kind of shape this down. But I mean, that would really only be if you're trying to control like heat or energy usage for something like small form factor. But there is kind of diminishing returns sometimes. So this is actually a pretty good setup. And when I went with kind of how I ultimately got the curve, I avoid plateaus, but you can see as I get up around 0.95, I really want it ramping up. And and then I kind of level it at 0.975 at around 3145. And that was able to get my score up over 9,000. And that's kind of a combination of overclocking, undervolting. Now, the second scenario would be like, okay, what happens if I I have all the cooling in the world. That's this scenario. It's a large card, large cooler. I have no power limitations, and I just want to go full bore on this thing. Well, you can actually just forget doing any amount of undervolting and just go for pure overclock up to the maximum voltage. So what you can see here, oh, that's the wrong one. I got a bunch of different curves I was working on. All right, so what I've done here is I keep it climbing, I keep it climbing, I keep it climbing, and I know, so the reason why that voltage slider doesn't do anything in here is the voltage is managed internally on the card, and back in the day you could override it, but you can't really hear. So I know it's going to go right up to about 1 volt, and I'm trying to target 3.2 gigahertz. And then I give it a little bit more to shoot for because I know it's probably not going to get there, but like 0.01, 3247. And I know it's not going to really go beyond that. So I end up just kind of like leveling it off after this because I don't want it to attempt to go any higher or, do something crazy. But I know it's going to end like kind of the end game right about 1.01. And so once again, the way I kind of did this is if we go back into the curve editor, I basically, instead of going for the undervolt and limiting it, I come in and I find, where I want my actual voltage to be. So like I probably want to target right around 1.0. So I bring that up to about 32. And then I come up to like my maximum. It's probably going to be definitely not that high. Yeah, I'll say right there. And then I select this and I just level it off. And that kind of gets me about where I want to go. So if we come back in and try all the same tricks, let's take a look at where this ends up. Okay, so now we can see we're not really voltage constrained. It looks like it's coming in at about 1.005, pulling about 325 watts, and we're coming in about 3180 on the megahertz. Yeah, bouncing around there. So uh, really you can see that we're pulling some more voltage. We're definitely pulling some more wattage, and we're eking out, an extra 160 megahertz or so. So it's, and we could have maybe taken the other one higher. But I felt like 3,000 was pretty good for sub 1 volt. But I mean, some of these cards have been pretty impressive with the amount of overclocking that they can do. So it's about to be over here. Let's take a look at the results. $82. All right, so pretty good. So you can see we're holding about 3165. and pretty decent. So I think we said we had 7% uplift on the last one. So let's see, if we got 8200 divided by 70, I think we said 446. 8200. Oh my god. It would help if I knew how to use a computer. Really struggling here. Divided by 7446. Yeah, 10% uplift. You know, this is a synthetic benchmark, but you can really get after it. So I had a couple different results that I loaded. We'll look through those here. So I was able to break 8,000 on the score with this was targeting 3 gigahertz at 0.995. So I actually undervolted it a little bit more than the one I demoed for you, and it was able to hold 3 gigahertz even. That's over 8,000. So you can tell we're like in the top of the bell curve here. And then I went for kind of my all out. I think my best score so far on this card, yeah, is this one, 8281. So what you'll find is if you like doing it, and it looks like this was about 3165 most of the way, I really couldn't get my card to boost above 32 very reliably. It would end up crashing, or in a live game it would crash. But if I kept it right below 32, which that's a huge increase on the core, but I was able to do a bunch of regular game benchmarks as well. But if you look at this one, you know, my score 8281, best is 8855. This madman had the card running at like 3.4 gigahertz or something. So I don't know, he's got something going on there. He's doing a lot better than me, but you know, in the gaming OC, I consider it like a mid-tier OC version, so it's not anything crazy, but able to put up pretty good numbers. And the more you kind of play with it, the more you can kind of trial and error and really massage it. I guess my main takeaway is don't leave any, you know, giant plateaus in there, because it'll be hesitant to climb to the next plateau. But when you do want, you know, the power to end at a certain point, I would recommend, just so you don't have like some weird transient over voltage or it trying to shoot for the moon. Because the other thing, you know, if you just come up and you just, you know, are like, okay, I want 1.01 there, and the off chance that it tries for 1.015, it might jump you over what's stable and the system will crash. So I don't like having plateaus in there, but I do like eventually just leveling it off. And once again, you just hit, well, you got to pick the point, and then you got to make sure you include that point. So shift, hold, drag, enter, enter, and it'll level it off there for you. And I just do that like as my own protection, because I'm already usually asking a lot of it. So even like in this scenario, like we brought that up to 32 and then leveled it, then I would want to come in here, and I find it like if there's this huge plateau, it's just going to hang around like right here, and it's not even going to attempt to give it to you. So then if I'm really trying to target 31 at 1.01, then I just kind of put that there. And that's the glory of like something like Speedway, is you can come in here and just start really playing with these. In this curve, and you can immediately, within seconds, you saw how fast it is to run the test, you can get feedback, you know, on kind of how your inputs are working. So I went through and I did the base, you know, because synthetics are great, but we wanted to take a look at the real performance. So I did the base level, and then I went through and I tested with, you know, around the 3 gigahertz undervolt overclock and then the max effort overclock. Let's take a look at those benchmarks. We've got the gameplay now. So first up is Black Ops 6. All these were tested at 1440p because that's how I would plan on using this thing. And then we had extreme settings, DLLA on this. And there, kind of moved me to the middle here. So what you can see is over on the way far left, we got the factory settings. The middle is my undervolt overclock, and then on the far right is just max effort overclock. So what you can see here is, if we take a quick pause, for the stock settings, it's targeting I mean, it's over the volt. It's 1.015 right here, pulling 210 watts at 2812 with the memory at 14,000. So as you can see, it's pulling mole voltage well under its power limit, and that's kind of the factory settings, what we're getting there. We come over to our undervolt overclock. So I was originally shooting for 3 gigahertz at 0.95, and when I was running the synthetic, it leveled right there at 3 gigahertz 0.95. But then remember, I had a little bit extra with the plateau just so it would seek. And then when we moved from synthetic to the real gaming, it took that little extra. So you'll see almost all these now, it's going to be 0.97 at 3.1. Which is awesome. That's a pretty solid undervolt overclock. And then even though it's using significantly more frequency here, pulling the same power using less voltage. And then of course we maxed the memory out there like we discussed. As you can tell, decent little jump there. And on the far right, we have kind of using as much voltage as we can, and we were really trying to target 32. In real gaming, I never got quite to 32. It usually hangs out about that 3187. This card, once I went over 32, I could force it up there, but I would normally see some sort of crash. But about like 3180 so, it was really solid. But as you can tell, performance-wise, they're pretty close. Move on to Cyberpunk 1440, the same. Ray Tracing Ultra, come down to DLAA, and then make sure frame generation is off, and then everything else good to go. As we come through here, once again, we can see factory about a little over a volt, 1.005. I think the highest I've seen is 1.015, right about that 2728. And temperatures, I mean, they're looking good, but I mean, for the extra 2 to 5 degrees, I think I'd take the performance. And then what you'll notice here is the benefit, I'm not like hard lining an overclock. I'm still utilizing the curve a lot like I do like when I talk about my PBO and my AMD processors, but every game is going to react slightly different. So as you can tell, for one reason or another, even though I was not restricting the voltage, it's running like 0.99 closer to 3.1, and then on my undervolt 0.95, and it's running about 50 megahertz lower. So these results were closer than expected, just because out of all the tests, this had the least amount of difference between the two settings. And you'll find that you can go through and tweak it a little bit more. This was just me in the afternoon kind of coming up with these two different curves, trying to target 0.95 at 3, and then trying to target 3.2 at 1 basically 0. But you can continue to tweak them. When you get into that curve shaper, you'll see, you might be going a month, and then suddenly you got a crash. You might have to tweak it, make sure it's perfect. But Counter-Strike, I said 1440p and high. I always just do high. Once again, here we see more of the same. Factory really pulling. Here we go, 1.015, 2800 megahertz, and then 0.97 at 31, and 1.005 at just shy of 32 again. So you can see we're actually still saving on voltage compared to the factory, and we're picking up, 350, almost 400 megahertz on the core. So, I mean, that's pretty huge. And in this game, it did help out quite a bit. But like I was saying, this was a short afternoon of me going through this. You can continue to play around with the curve to get it better and better and better. I find that just the more time I spend, I'll continually be able to eke out just a tiny bit more performance, working on some of those mid-range points. But ultimately, you want to find where you're stable at the peak, and then kind of work that middle ground, because I mean, all your money is made between 0.95 and basically 1.01 is kind of where it's at. And as you'll see when we get to the results, as you start stretching it to the higher end, there's diminishing returns. Like, you can continue to add voltage to eke out a couple more megahertz, but You can get 90% of the way there when actually running lower voltage, which there's some advantages to that. Next up, Doom Dark Ages. I just got this game, super excited about it. I'm already having a ton of fun. Once again, we're going to DLLA Ultra Nightmare 1440p, and we'll take a look at how it does. All right, yeah, so these were even closer. Once again, 0.97, 3.1, just barely higher when you give it that extra voltage. And like I said, I could try to force it over 3.2, but like there's just diminishing returns. It gets unstable. This is really where it's happy. And I mean, we are like 90% of the way there right here. And you can tell it keeps the temps. I mean, they're right in the middle, but we're talking about 59 versus 60 versus 63. Like this isn't crazy regardless. But that's kind of how they perform in game. We're going to take a look at the results next and purely see how the numbers worked out. All right, so we saw the live footage, and I'll just kind of break down the synopsis here. So we went through Speedway was our synthetic, basically to get us, dialed in and get us going down the right road. And then we ran Black Ops, Cyberpunk 2077, Counter-Strike 2, and then Doom Dark Ages. And what you can see here is I think the real champion was that slight undervolt at 3 gigahertz. That seemed like the sweet spot for my card. Yeah, you could squeeze a little bit more out of it, but with the slight undervolt and the less power usage, I mean, I feel like the card would run that way forever and never have an issue. You could probably game like that 24/7 for like 8 years and it'd be fine. Um, and it gives you 90% of the uplift. So Black Ops 6, 8% increase with doing the 3 gigahertz at 0.995 and 10% increase over stock with just the all out trying to target 3.2 at 1.01. Cyberpunk 2077, huge gains here. 16% for the 3 gigahertz, 17% trying to go for the 3.2. Counter-Strike 2. For Counter-Strike 2, you got to look at the 1% lows picked up 10 to 12 FPS. Like, that's not something to sneeze at. And then the averages picked up like 30, 40 FPS. So that's pretty solid there. And then Doom the Dark Ages picked up about the same. But in this case, the undervolt actually did 1 FPS better on average, but 1 less on 1% low. So I'm going to call those basically a tie for whatever reason in that game. And I think that was just released. So they're probably still working out the drivers on that anyway. But across the board, I think my daily driver config, I'm probably going to leave it in that 3 gigahertz at 0.995. That thing was rock solid, super stable. I'm going to leave the memory maxed out. And that's probably how I'm going to run it day to day. And that's about a 7% increase on performance. And it's pretty decent because, then if you are into multi-frame generation or whatever, you can times that by 4 if you want. Your 10 FPS becomes 40 FPS. Everything just always gets bigger and bigger. But this was real simple to do, and it's a little extra bonus on these cards. I feel like these ones overclock. I did a lot of overclocking on my 4000 series, and it was about the same. No, I don't think it was as good. I could usually pick up like closer to 4 to 5% on most things with just an easy little light undervolt overclock. But these ones are doing pretty dang solid. And this is just one of my cards. I'm going to take a look at what I can do performance-wise on some of the other 50 series. But if you have a card in particular you want prioritized, let me know in the comments. And I'll take a look at kind of what I can do with it if I got one that I can get a hold of. And if not, drop a like and subscribe. And thanks for watching today.